What does health and safety culture mean to you, Tom?
I mean, it's kind of everything in a way, isn't it? It's how people behave, how they feel, how they treat others. Mostly how they act. It comes from their behaviours, right? If you're behaving properly on site, if you're, for want of a better word, then obviously you would take from that the culture is better. Obviously, if it's a bit wild and a bit lawless out there on the sites, then obviously the culture has slipped and there's not a huge amount of control over it.
Russell, culture for you?
So for me, I think it's about care, leadership, behaviours, and all the little things that matter. And to give you an example of that is when you go onto a construction site and you walk around and you start to see the simple things like housekeeping that should be done really, really well. If they're not done well, that has an impact on subconsciously on how people treat the site and how people behave. And that has an impact on the culture.
And do you think culture then, so health and safety culture and culture, just generally company culture, do you think the two things are separate, or do you think they're the same?
I think they're inexplicably linked. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Because I think if there's a general care and attention to people and to getting the little things right on sites, then I think that bleeds out across the rest of the culture for the whole business, not just on site. Yeah.
I always think that the welfare is a great indicator of the culture and of what you're going to see on the site as well on a granular level. So when you go in, if there's a nice tidy canteen and the changing rooms are well kept, then that shows that the principal contractor is taking on their responsibilities, but showing the care to the people out on site, right, and showing them a bit of respect, basically. Like, look, you're out there, you're doing a tough job, but when you come back in, we're going to give you a nice place to sit and relax and change. But then above that has to be provided by senior management, right? So the site management can try and do all they want, but unless that comes from higher up, right, which then sort of leads into the business culture, they've got no chance. So yeah, they're massively linked.
Two questions. One, it was something you picked up on earlier, and I want to come into it. What does lawless mean on site? Give us some examples.
Cool. How long have we got?
I was going to say things like we would class lawless as things like radios on site,
shorts. The high vis is off because it's too hot, even though it's a tiny little vest, that kind of thing.
And that attitude of the age-old phrase of, oh well, I've only got to do this quickly, or it's only going to take me a minute, so I'm just going to do this. Yeah. That kind of summarises.
I don't need the permit for this bit of cutting because it is this one cut.
I've only got one cut, and I'm doing it on a bin.
Yeah.
Okay, and then you started to go on to talk about organisational culture, and this is something that is one of the hot topics that I sort of focus in on at the moment, which is regards to culture has to start at the leadership level. And all too often on construction projects, it sort of is every project is its own sort of separate company, and they have their own cultures. So, from your experiences in terms of culture and starting at the top, how important do you think that is?
It's phenomenally important. And I can give you two examples that as soon as you started talking about leadership is, I worked, probably 15 years ago, worked on a project where it was a 4 or 5 story traditional Fulham Chelsea townhouse, basement being dug, that kind of work. You walked in through the front door and there was nothing after it. And the owner of the principal contractor company, when he used to walk round, refused to put boots on, and he used to walk around in like these slip-on leather shoes, and his behaviours set the culture for everyone else working on site. And transversely at the other end of the scale, working on a really large scale project in Canary Wharf, the health and safety manager started every single induction and asked each individual whether they had children, they had a wife, did they work, were you the sole breadwinner? The care and attention he gave to each individual and cared about their lives and their livelihood made a difference, and he brought them all into a team. As a result, and I think a lot of it came down to him, over 6 or 7 million person hours, we had 1 Riddle.
Okay.
So I think that that kind of is the contrast between the two kind of styles and how leadership is vastly important to setting culture.
Yeah, I think it's the only place to start, because I think if it's not embedded at the very top, it's like any company. It all takes its lead from the person at the very top of it, or the leadership group. And so many times I'll go into meetings with senior managers, leaders, and I'll know instantly or within a couple of minutes what the driver is, what that culture. I could tell before I even walk on any of their sites what the culture is going to be from having spoken to the CEO or the managing director after 2 minutes. If you walk in and the first thing they say is, "You're here to keep me out of prison," right? You know that you're going to have a culture that's based on rules, process, fear in certain instances. If you've got someone who says, "We're doing this because we want to reach for the stars, we want to be a £40 million turnover company and we're currently 10, you know you're going to have someone who's really hot in terms of business growth, and they're going to see that health and safety is a key driver to help them get to that next level. So for me, it's always been about that. You can tell a lot from those initial discussions with the leaders of the business. One of the things I often think about is the makeup of construction, and how the makeup of construction and the way that the main contractors have their supply chains, subcontractors, and then those subcontractors sub out to other subcontractors, and it might even be John, who they've picked up from the car park in a home base the day before, and I often think that contractors, they're managing chaos. It's like, the analogy I always bring to it, or the example I always bring to it, is like, this is a construction company, no matter how good they are. It isn't Red Bull Racing, right? Where you've got a company that's got 150 of the best, most high-performing people on race days or race meets, and they've got them in the paddock, and they've got another 800 back at the factory, all bought into one vision, one mission, which is to get that car on the line and to be the fastest car there. It's very obvious that that's it, and everyone's bought into it, and they can pull from the best people, and they can drive forward with that. Whereas in construction, you've got the main contractor who's got their mission, which a lot of the times is to make money, no judgment, that's what it's about. Build homes, make money, build whatever. But then they're reliant on all of these different subcontractors, lots of them are different based on jobs to jobs, based on the commercial factors, who have all got their different cultures, right? Some good, some not so good. And then with those, you've then got the subcontractors who, when you're dealing with the directors of those companies, they're often they're pooling the workforce who haven't got any idea about any of the cultures. And before long, you've got no way, in my opinion, of pulling that whole thing together as nicely as it would be on in a large institution that's got everyone in play. And I think those dynamics of the industry are often forgotten about when management consultants or people go into it not understanding the dynamics of construction. They would try and apply something and say, well, this is the way to get a better culture, and they just completely forget that the construction industry doesn't have some of the luxuries that
the workforce is not consistent enough, is it?
No, it isn't. And then pick up on that, it's a massive thing that I'm passionate about is price work and subcontractors. And when you actually break down in it moves slightly away from health and safety and into more health, safety and welfare for the human beings. Is you've got a subcontractor that's gone to site for a week, they've got a piece of price work to do. In their head, as soon as they've done that piece of work, they can go and they can move on to the next job. So they turn up Monday morning, their sole focus is getting through that induction as quick as possible and signing whatever they need to sign so they can start work on site. And then they're so driven to just get done what they just need to do. And they're not, like you mentioned, they're not brought into that broader picture. But then on the other side of that, from the perspective of their mental health, if they know they're going to finish that work in 3 or 4 days, in their head they're like, right, well, I need to sort out next week's work because I'm going to be finished earlier. And then they've got to think about, are they going to get paid for this work, and how are they going to get everything from this site to the next site? And they haven't got a line manager like we have in you to be able to say, like, struggling today, not feeling too great, going to work. There's all of these things that they don't have. And I think that leadership and that culture of the price work in the industry, I don't think it helps with people's mental health. And I don't think that helps people buy into the vision of achieving that one goal safely, on time, in budget either.
I think you also, and it's not really anything that we focus on, but the quality side of it, right? If you're on price work, there's a lot more chance that corners are cut in terms of the quality of the work, which, you know, generally is not our concern, but it should be. But something I was going to talk about price, and I was thinking, what do you do then? Do you outlaw it? Do you rule it out? Is it something that should be considered in terms of safety culture and standards on site? Do you say, you know what, we're not going to allow price work because we know the impacts that it has?
It's really difficult. You know, just if we're just focusing on health and safety, we'd love to say, yeah, well, actually, why isn't I would personally love to see a principal contractor that's not just a project management company that brings in all their resource to deliver something. I would love to see organisations that have got the broad set of skills to be able to deliver the project, to deliver multiple projects with, you know, 600 or 800 people as PAYE, because that would be great for them, because actually the security that would buy, individuals working within the industry, building a pension, having private healthcare, and actually being able to be treated a little bit differently, I think we'd see a massive change. But commercially,
would it?
It wouldn't work.
No, it wouldn't work commercially. So it's not going to. So ultimately, as much like you said, as much as we'd want it to happen, there's not a chance in hell that will ever take place. It just won't, because they wouldn't be able to be commercially viable, and the clients wouldn't accept it. So the clients would then go to the construction manager or the project management company who are building it like that, and there's some big tier ones out there who will deliver it in that way. So, and yeah, it's kind of a little bit outside of our pay grade to be thinking about those kind of issues, but it all builds into the health and safety element of it, which is, I think a lot of the time people just see, you know, I think there's an issue in our profession, in the industry, is that health and safety people don't really understand that kind of cultural aspect to it. They can understand technical safety, and they see a piece of temporary works design, and they're like, that don't quite look like right, we need to do this, we need to do that. Maybe not come up with a solution, but come up with the challenge to then come up with the right answer. But they don't understand the whole ecosystem that fits around construction. And I think that's a big problem in the industry for health and safety people, which is to make them more commercially focused. And I think health and safety people sometimes in the departments, it's also treated as this siloed subject. You know, it's like the safety team. And ultimately, health and safety I see health and safety as more of like a value. It should just be a value that sits across the organisation, which is, we want to earn a lot of money because we're a commercial enterprise, and that's what makes us do well. And at the same time, we don't want to do any activity that is going to be detrimental to the health and safety of our people and our workforce. But what health and safety people do is they come into leadership teams and they sort of carp and they say, well, they need to be doing this because it's the right thing to do. Health and safety is the most important thing, must be the number one priority. It's never going to be the number one priority, because, and I say this all the time, if health and safety is the number one priority, if it's not, because commercial has to be the number one priority, because otherwise you've got no one to worry about from a health and safety standpoint. So yeah, that for me is just, from a safety perspective, being able to have more influential discussions with senior leaders. I think it's incumbent on us to be able to talk to leaders in the language that they talk, and to understand the commercial realities, and to understand they're working in an industry which is fucking hard, right? Which is really hard, especially now, to make money. You're working harder for less than you were 20, 30, 40 years ago. That is the nuts and bolts of it. They're more regulated than ever. They've got to constantly evolve. They've now got, you know, things like the Building Safety Act, which is definitely the right thing, but it's constantly evolving. And I think we have to go in there and show that we can be an enabler, and we can show people that we understand their pain, we understand their challenges, and come up with a solution that fits what they need, not a tick box, out of the box solution that's like, okay, you need this. It's like, actually, right, what you need is, let's say, to start with, the gap analysis process, which is understanding what goes on within your business. Before we get started on providing any solution, we will provide you with a gap analysis, a diagnostic. We'll get to know your business. We'll get to know your people by actually engaging, not by just going on site and doing an inspection. We'll engage, we'll speak to people. find out what's really going on, if you're brave enough to accept it and to understand what the challenges that are going to be brought up. Because if there's a culture within the business where they're fearful, you're probably not going to get the most out of it. But what we want to do is we want to lift the bonnet up of the company, find the good, the bad and the ugly, and every company, no matter how good, will always have it. And our job is to bring it, shine a sort of a light or a mirror on things and say, okay, this is going really, really well. These areas, not so well. This is what you should do about it. And that's kind of one of the key things within Havio that we like to do, which is to get involved at that leadership level. And you start there. You don't start at the middle management level and the operative level, because they can't influence it in that way. You need to start at the very top to understand from the CEO or the managing director or whoever where they want to go as a business, what their challenges are, and then you sort of work your way around the organisation thereafter, and then present it back to them and hopefully provide them with a strategic roadmap of what they need to do going forward, which hopefully moves them along the piece from a health and safety maturity perspective, which is at the very outset, you've got the infancy stage, then developing, performing, high performing, excelling. Most construction contractors are going to be in the developing stage. If it's infancy, they won't be getting us involved. It'll be kind of developing, maybe some of them performing. And it's like, how do we get you to the next level? That is really what that process is all about.
And I think picking up on that, when you touch on your site inspections, it's a big time commitment as part of the puzzle. But when you look on your plan, do, check, act model, which we should all be familiar with us health and safety bods, it's the site inspections are just the check bit. There's another three elements in that to be able to help influence and tell the organisation on where they are in terms of their maturity.
Yeah, and the inspection. So full disclosure, we do lots of inspections every month with a lot of our clients. I do sometimes wonder if clients ask themselves the actual question, which is, what are we trying to achieve by doing the inspections? Because I think a lot of people just do them because they've been told, or they've always done that in the past. And it's like, okay, well, we need to have an inspection. When you actually ask them the reasons why you're doing it, some of them don't even know what they're doing it for. And our industry has been very, very good at creating a model around inspections that have been sold to clients. It's like, well, you need the policy, you need the competent person, and you need these inspections, and it makes them lots of money and it churns the money through. Whereas I'm a believer in, it'll always be a part of it anyway, because as you said, it's part of that check process, but it's not always the thing to drive, to lead it with. You can go on site and do inspections, and you can be picking up on the same thing month after month, week after week, whatever frequency they do it at. And then you're looking at it, and we're looking at the altitude data, and we're going, well, they're getting worse. It's like, they're not getting better. So it's like, well, why have us do inspections on a 2 weekly basis if it's not improving things? So then we should be going to the client, which we do often, and saying, right, something's not right. We need to do something here, because culturally you're not taking on the improvements. We're basically picking up on what's hazard spotting on that day and saying, well, this isn't right, this is good, this isn't. And it needs to be more just needs to be more strategically thought of, in my opinion.
So that sort of then takes you back to the culture to an extent, right? Because if they're happy to have the inspections, and most people go monthly, it's a nice, easy, scheduling, and it once a month. But if they're seeing that number not go up or go down, then it is a bit of an indication, obviously, of their culture, right? And their desire to genuinely improve things, just at that level, just at that number level. But maybe we are better, and we would be better used, would you say, than having the meetings? So maybe we do 2 inspections once a month, and the third one is actually a meeting where we sit down and we discuss that kind of thing and talk about the issues and why there hasn't been an improvement.
Yeah, I mean, the better way of doing it, to be honest, like the ideal from a consultancy model with a client, so look, a contractor has 2 options, right? Or they've got 3 options as I see it, or 4. They don't do anything. Don't do anything, right? That's not really an option. Have a freelance, independent health and safety advisor, which there's some brilliant ones out there, but they can only cover so much. Then you go down the consultancy market, of which we're one of them, and then you've got the internal route, right? So, in my opinion, where we come into our own is with companies who want to get better If you want to just tick the box, I've said it all along, don't come to Havio. If you're just interested in ticking the box, there'll be a freelance consultant or there'll be a consultancy that will do it for cheaper and will tick your box, and you'll get whatever comfort you get from that. False comfort, but that's your prerogative. If you want to come to us, it's like, well, we're going to want to start more often than not, unless you've got really robust processes in place, we're going to want to start with a gap analysis, understand what's going on. From the gap analysis, we're going to then want to present it back to your senior leaders and have those uncomfortable conversations. And from that, we're then going to want to create a health and safety strategy, or a strategy that fits into your overarching business strategy. If you don't have a strategy, right, if you don't have a North Star, then how the fuck do you know where to go? Right? It's like, well, how do you know if you've achieved or you haven't achieved? The only achievement you're going to have is how many incidents have we had, right? So it's like, create a strategy which creates the direction for us to then be held accountable. Do that, and then all of the different services underneath it are just tools to ensure the strategy is implemented and ultimately the objectives of the business are achieved. If you've got a consultancy that can flip in between strategic and operational, and they can do both, great. Some freelancers can do that because they've got the experience. Some consultancies are absolutely woeful at it and will only want to deal with the inspections at operational level because they don't want the hassle of dealing with the strategic
That's the easy bit, right? Walking around a site and saying, da-da-da-da-da.
And then internal teams, you've obviously got the challenge with, there's lots of different levels. You go and get a health and safety director in a main contractor of, let's say, 50 million. They're not going to want to go and do the inspections. So you're either going to have to get a health and safety advisor to do the inspections, or you're going to have to pay a consultancy anyway.
And I think bringing back onto the commerciality piece you're saying about going to site, doing the inspections, there's also that piece around the frequency in which we do inspections, and us as a business looking at how much clients are spending and saying to them, look, you spent £40,000 on inspections with us last year. That would buy you, rather than us visiting site twice a month and getting this very small snapshot, that would buy you X amount of days per month across X amount of sites, and being a little bit more embedded. So rather than just reporting on the right there, right then issues that are happening, we're actually helping them be better at the same time, rather than just reporting about that moment in time. And I think that's also a really useful tool.
I agree. Right, let's address the elephant in the room. Operatives on site, different cultures, different approaches to health and safety. We've all been on site in the last week. We'll have all seen people doing very stupid things, right? What's going on? Because from a psychological perspective, we can talk and we can wax lyrical about how health and safety needs to be done right and everything else like that. And you go onto site and you go and speak to a trade, and you've got their best interest at heart, and you kind of get told to do one. Or you can do. So what's going on? Because ultimately they're not stupid. They know that it's for their own good, but they're not doing it. What's going on, in your opinion, at the site level? I'm more interested in at the site level.
I think time is key. Whether it is because they're on a price or simply because they're behind. Right? No one ever lives up to their program, do they? Everybody has a false comfort, right, that they won't get hurt, whether it's an arrogance or that's maybe a bit harsh, but won't happen to me, right? There is also the fact of the industry is what it is, and it is maybe, there's still that little attitude of like, just get on with it, don't be a tart, jump up there and get that fixed and crack on with it. And maybe because it is so male dominated, everybody's like, well, I don't want to look like a tart, so I will get up there, I will take that risk, right? Yeah. And then, 9 times out of 10, they might be all right, but the 10th time they come falling off of it, right? And it is just because we want to get on with it, and we've done a few investigations recently, right, on incidents. And a lot of it, when you go into root causes and things like that, fundamentally, it's that the bloke was trying to actually get things moving. He was trying to actually help by cutting a corner or doing something reckless, but the heart was in the right place, I think, for the most point. They're trying to get the job done, they're trying to get that out of the way, get that done. But it is just, I don't know, lack of care, lack of awareness, lack of experience. If you get hurt, you're more likely to try and protect yourself again. Not that we want people getting hurt, obviously. But unless you've experienced it, you may not see the risk of it.
Okay, Ross?
I really struggle with the site, not the site level stuff, but I always end up bringing it back to leadership and the culture of our industry. Because you walk around site and you'll see people that have got boots taped up with their steel toe cap bit is exposed, and you think, there's no way your trainers at home are going to look like that. They get changed and they've got their nice, bright, shiny, brand new white, whatever make they might be, trainer when they leave site. And I think there's this subconscious issue in the industry that it is construction, and it's a dirty place, and it's slowly being dragged forward, I think, into the 21st century. But you'll sit on the tube and you'll see people that won't sit next to a construction worker for whatever reason. And I think a lot of that all boils down to people's care. People not caring about things on site, being slapdash. We mentioned earlier about, oh, well, I've just got to do that one cut, so I'll lean halfway out of a window, or I'll do something unsafely, and all of those little touch points just make that people just take more risks. They care less about what they've got to do because they might only be on site for a day or a week or a very short period of time. And there's the other issue with we don't have a really good positive feedback and approachable culture in the industry, where if you on some sites you can go, if an operative went in and said, oh, can I have a chat with a construction lead and a safety guy, because I'm really struggling to safely do X, Y, and Z. I would say 8 times out of 10 you get told to get crack on with it, or you're going to get thrown off site and we'll get someone else that can do it. And that's what I mean by culture. Yeah, there's your drawing. You just crack on with it. We'll get someone else that can. And I think that's a problem in the industry.
Okay, so what is one thing that leaders can do to change the safety culture on their sites this week?
Personally, I think we see a lot of leaders, if we're talking about construction managers on sites, package managers, even black hats, they're spending a lot of time running around, not literally putting out fires, but metaphorically putting out fires. And I think them pausing and taking a breath before they're making decisions and thinking a bit more holistically about those decisions, and actually thinking, in planning terms, what is going to be the implication if we do this? Because we often go on site and see unsafe things and going, well, why is that like that? And someone will just go, I've got no idea.
This might be a little bit controversial, but I think that the one thing they could do is get out from behind the desk and actually go and walk on the bloody site. Yeah, because what's happening is, and this is what I see this time and time again, you get the project teams that they're either saying that they're too drowned in paperwork and they can't get out, or what I see a lot of the times is they've just been wholly unproductive and they're not actually getting out on site when they could. They absolutely could. Yeah. So it's using their time better, not asking the questions, why the hell am I going into this meeting? Right, do I need to be sat in a meeting for another hour talking about X, or go and speak to this meeting? Because basically you've got managers who are just going from meeting to meeting to meeting. It's like, that meeting is not going to stop some of these issues out on site. Get out and see what's bloody going on, because it's a shit show, right, in some instances. So my number one thing would be to get out, get your boots on, get out from behind your desk, go and show leadership from the front and be out on the project, and actually let the teams out on site. If you're running a 400-person project, is actually lead from the front and let them see that the leaders of the project are actually taking an interest in the project, rather than maybe going around on a site safety tour once a month because they're told to. It's all about communication and engagement, and if the site operatives see that it's been led from the front, I can guarantee you the standards will go up. Obviously there's a lot more that needs to take place, but yeah, it's getting out there and in amongst it, and that goes for everyone in the organisation, CEO, MD, downwards. Don't just stay in your office and sit behind your screen. Yeah. Right, wrapping it up, a little bit of fun with regards to culture, and again, a bit controversial, but what would you say from a trade perspective? Who would you say are the number one the number one contenders for poor health and safety cultures? And this is going to be a little bit of a generalisation, and this is generally a bit of fun.
You're going to get me chinned next time I go on site, I think, if I'm too honest. They all have their good and bad points. Yeah, I'm trying to be diplomatic.
I know who I would say.
I think scaffolders, right? They've got their reputation for a reason. Yeah. I think they're not careless, but they have that invincibility complex, you might call it, right? They're up there at height all day. They must think they can bounce or something sometimes, the way they behave. But yeah, they're hard workers, lads, so yeah, keep up the good work. But yeah, they're a little bit reckless, should we say, at times.
Okay.
They are my biggest frustration as well. Scaffolders, it seems like or in my perspective, their sole purpose is to make sure that what they build is safe for everybody else that's working at height. And they don't, it seems like they, like you say, it seems like they bounce, they don't take their own health and safety into account. And you see all sorts of stuff. They are probably one of my biggest frustrations, given the fact that they're there to make something safe for other people. They don't care about themselves.
We saw a good one the other day down at the hotel. When we were at roof level and we were looking at a few other bits, and we looked over on the other side and there was a fella standing mysteriously at the exact same height we were, but in a little parapet wall, and we were thinking, how's he up there? And suddenly we sort of clocked him and we went over to investigate, and he jumped straight down, and you realise he'd struck all his handrail but left his platform and was pulling up. It was a system, so he's pulling up the layer platforms as he goes, and he's 9 floors up. Yeah. So if he takes a slip, he's just going to the ground. But in his mind, for some reason, he's not clipped on, which is the big issue there, right? Yeah. But he just thinks it's fine. So
I mean, I think just to say it, and not to provide just a general cover, there's some brilliant scaffolding contractors out there, and they're the ones. I've always thought that you can really differentiate yourself in the scaffolding market, and I won't name them, but there are probably 3 that I can think of right here, right now, which are so far above the rest. And you see them, they're on the Mace sites, they're on all the tier 1 projects, because they've got that ingrained culture, and they've done a bloody good job at it as well. So yeah, I think it's just providing that balance before all the scaffolders decide to chin us.
Yeah, and I think the other thing, and it's actually across all trades. It's not any one trade specific, but I guess really probably more on the finishing trades, is just any finishing trade that doesn't do clean as you go. And you walk on site and it's an absolute dump, and you just think, why don't you just get a bag so you could clip your cable ties and just put them straight in the bag, rather than have 1,000 cable ties on the floor. Just I think again, it comes back to a bit of like leadership and culture, doesn't it? We didn't ask what yours was, Jack.
Oh, I've got out of that one, haven't I?
So what's your pet peeve or your pet hate trade on sites?
You can't say scaffolders.
I'm not going to say so. No, I'm going to leave the scaffolders alone. I think it's usually because there's the sheer amount of work that's on site, but M&E contractors, and especially the way that M&E contractors are resourced, you tend to get, they're either a mechanical bias or they're electrical bias, and then they bring in the other side to it that they can't control. And because they flood the sites with lots and lots of resource, you then have lots and lots of issues, but repetitive issues, and they're wanting to do things very quick. I don't know quite how they're priced, these jobs, but so M&E contractors are the ones that I tend to have an issue with. I could have brought up, brickworkers and roofers, but let's be honest, it tends to be the more high risk trades, right? The ones that are going to counterintuitively, but they're the ones that don't manage it as well. So that's me. No splinters in my arse.